welcome to my movie review for Good Fortune. As always, I just wanted to start off with a quick spoiler warning. If you haven't seen this film yet and you want to see it without, knowing anything about it, this is your warning to click off of the video. But otherwise, I think we should just jump right into it because I both have a lot to say and nothing to say about this one. Alright, so hopefully you guys can see what I've included up in the top corner, because to me, it is the most baffling thing I think I have ever seen in the history of the world, because this movie has amazing reviews, especially for a comedy, and meanwhile, I personally think it is one of the, worst movies I have ever seen of all time. And so here's the thing, I gotta keep this fast. So I genuinely am baffled by this score, and I feel like the only reason it can be getting this high of a score is sort of because of its message and themes. And the thing is I need to emphasize, and I don't think this should be a surprise to anyone, I agree wholeheartedly with the themes of the movie in that, workers need to be paid a whole lot more, and there's a ton of unfair inequality with sort of like different wealth classes and, just the economy, and it's sort of a gig economy, all of that stuff. I literally, that is 100%, in accordance with my own values, etc. That being said, the actual movie as a movie just is bafflingly bad. So when I went to see this, I was pretty excited because I'd seen at the time there was, I think I accidentally saw this on opening day, kind of unintentionally, because I thought the movie wasn't going to be great. But the critic review at that time was like 60 something percent, and there was no popcorn meter. The point being is that I was surprised by it getting already that high of a score, but I went into it with mostly an open mind, though I felt like the marketing hadn't looked very promising. I hadn't laughed at one of the trailers or something like that. And so right from the get-go, the biggest thing was, for me right from the beginning, was that the acting was so stiff. It was this really crazy bad acting, and some of these actors I've seen in other things, and they're great at acting and super fluid. I mean, this is like a huge cast full of really A-list celebrities, and some of the acting was just so stiff, and it felt like they did a thing where normally if you have two people and they're talking in a conversation, you'll sometimes have it where let me grab a piece of let's say blue chalk. You have one camera that's pointed at one person's reaction and another camera pointed at the other person's reaction, so you can actually film both perspectives, but have the actors just do one conversation, so they're able to get into sort of a rhythm of one person says something, the other person, and it feels like a natural dialogue. Ba da da da, da 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 da, oh da 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 da, yeah da 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 da, that kind of thing. So with this, I felt like they only had one camera, so they would film someone's perspective. They would say, oh, I'm going to the store. And then the other person wouldn't know how the other person's delivery was. And then it would go, action. And they'd say, you're going to the store. The other person would be like, yep, I'm going to the store. But there wouldn't be a rhythm to it. And tonally, they would be at different levels. And so it would always be really stiff. Yeah, oh my God, my car crashed and now I'm worried I'm going to lose my job. Oh, that sucks that your car crashed. It was this really weird, almost sort of like The Room at times. And then beyond that, it's sort of a weird plot, because it kind of feels like one of those plots where it's how do you wrap this up? Because basically the premise is, there's, the poor, Uber Eats driver, which is played by Aziz Ansari, and then extremely wealthy tech bro played by Seth Rogen, and they switch lives because there's Keanu Reeves, who plays an angel, who wants to help a lost soul, and he sees that the Uber driver driver is a lost soul. But the thing is obviously having access to all of the wealth and privilege and sort of advantages that the tech bro has makes, Aziz Ansari's character's life infinitely better immediately. So it's sort of like it's a tough plot to write yourself out of, because it's basically like, how do you get the Uber driver to want to go back to his terrible life while also having it be harmonious with your themes of there being this inequality and that like it's unfair and that like Uber Eats drivers have it really rough and tech bros have it like way too cushy, and they kind of like fake jobs and they don't have nearly the disadvantages that the Uber Eats drivers have. How do you get him to go back or have some sort of like weird emotional journey? And then you add on top of that the complicatedness that they made the tech bro guy really likable. So, right from the get-go of the movie, he's like really friendly with the Uber Eats driver and doesn't treat him like, oh, he's just like a robot or something, and it's a big theme we normally see, that the wealthy think of their employees as just being sort of like cogs in a machine to them, or objects, and they don't care about workers' rights or the health of their workers. Like at like an Amazon factory, like workers aren't treated like humans basically. And so, you would expect the guy who's now going to have a terrible life as an Uber Eats driver, you would expect them to kind of build him up as being a villain, where it's like, oh, he's, so mean. But instead, he's extremely nice. He shows the Uber Eats guy around his mansion. He gives him food, and they talk about, dating. And he's always super grateful whenever, Aziz's character does anything. He's always, oh, thank you so much. That's so awesome that you did this, etc. And then all the more so, once they switch, he actually like does a very admirable job of trying to be like an Uber Eats driver, because again, with the themes that Aziz is trying to play with, you would expect it to be that then suddenly this tech bro has to try to be a Uber Eats driver and has such a bad time and like is so incompetent that he literally can't do it. Because they even make a joke about it where a lot of tech bros will say, oh, I'm self-made, and if you took away all of my wealth, I could build it all back up again really easily. It wouldn't be hard for me at all. And so you would expect that he now has to be an Uber Eats driver, and he's just a whiny and has no charisma and terrible at deadlines and can't, doesn't know how to stand in a line and get the food, and so he can't drive well, so he's just sucks at the job and is really like a poor sport about it. But honestly, some of the best parts of the movie is when he's being an Uber Eats driver, because he's also working with Gabriel, which is Keanu Reeves' character, and they're both struggling to get their bills paid, but they're both trying, and it's so like admirable to see them both working really hard within this environment in which things are basically built to be against you and built to make things hard for you. So you're actually rooting on Seth Rogen's character, especially because then Aziz Ansari's character, the Uber Eats guy, now the tech bro, he starts lying to the two and trying to get out of having to switch back, which on the one hand, I get it. I wouldn't want to switch back as well. But within the like framework of storytelling, he begins to play the role of the antagonist. And so you're basically rooting for Seth Rogen's character to eventually basically defeat the antagonist and get to go back to his old life. So very weird thematically that it forces you to root for the other guy. And then to go with the whole acting being stiff thing, I feel like they had to have Seth play the tech bro and Aziz play the Uber Eats guy, because they were also trying to make sort of some commentaries about like white privilege and things like that. So it's sort of like a forced casting for that reason. That being said, in terms of purely skill of acting and in terms of like where they flourish, Aziz would have been a much better cast for being the tech bro, and Seth Rogen would have been a much better cast to be this, regular Joe Schmo Uber Eats guy, because Seth normally plays like stoners who are like plays the role of the everyman. It's just sort of the relatable guy who's like, oh, I'm just, a blue collar worker, likes to smoke weed, and I deliver pizzas for a living. And then Aziz, like in Parks and Rec and stuff, usually plays the kind of smarmy guy who likes to go clubbing and all of that. So their acting chops would have been a lot better, because then we would have seen Aziz getting to play a sort of smarmy tech bro who now has to, sleep in a motel and do these horrible jobs, and he would have done a better job of being like, oh man, what the hell, I have to, what do you mean I have to do all this work, etc. It's very much in line with the character he played in Parks and Rec. And then you would get Seth Rogen getting to play this normal stoner dude who now suddenly lives in a mansion. And I feel like with his acting chops, he would have done a better job of kind of having that, like, I'm a normal everyday guy who's now in a mansion. Isn't this crazy? Wow, like this is all so charming to me, etc. So in that sense, the casting was sort of really weird. But again, I feel like there were sort of some like meta reasons why they had to cast the characters the way they did. But so, that sort of covers my thoughts on sort of the themes being sort of muddied and weird. Because also then at the end of the movie, to spoil it, they do switch back. Aziz does end up having to live like a pretty bad life, but he ultimately just kind of becomes motivated to sort of make a documentary about the gig economy. And then Seth Rogen goes back, but he seems to remember the events, even though he's not really supposed to. With like the way the lore works, but he starts fighting for workers, rights, and wants to have, the Uber Eats drivers get paid a whole lot more and stuff like that. So once again, he kind of ends up being this good guy, but I really feel like the movie would have been better if he was a villain in that way. Almost having a like a Christmas Carol moment where he wakes up and he realizes, like, I've got to be nicer to these workers because otherwise, it's fundamentally bad of me to do this. While with this one, again, everything he did was actually pretty reasonable. The big conflict is that at one point Aziz uses the company card to pay for a meal because he can't afford it, and Seth Rogen's character had technically encouraged him to go to the fancy restaurant. But the thing is like with company cards, I don't even blame Seth Rogen's character for firing him, because there's usually there's a lot more going on behind the scenes with the way that those charges get audited for tax purposes, etc. And it's a business card, not just his personal card. So he would kind of have to fire the employee because his other business collaborators would, his finance department would eventually be asking about this when he got audited, etc. So, it was like a weird circumstance where I felt like he should have been, I kind of thought it was going to be like, oh, he seems really friendly, but then he does something just, really brutal, like maybe steals an idea of Aziz Ansari and monetizes it, or blames Aziz to get out of something, and then Aziz gets in jail, and then they switch, and then, etc. But really, they just made him a likable guy, and then again, showed him being pretty admirable for trying to work in the economy. I feel like the best part of this movie was definitely Keanu Reeves's role, just because it's fun seeing Keanu, but also he had sort of the funniest, in terms of it's a comedy, the funniest sort of joke was having an angel become a chain smoker and a drinker who's just working as a dishwasher, because it's just sort of I don't know, it's an amusingly absurd idea to see an angel just ripping cigs outside of the restaurant he works at while he's covered in sweat and dishwater and stuff. just because I never thought I would see that in a movie. So that was funny. And again, he was just sort of, it's kind of funny because I've always seen him in much more serious roles like John Wick or Johnny Silverhand or something like that. So seeing him play such a goofy character, but also still nailing it, was really interesting to see his acting chops, because credit given where credit's due. I believed him in his performance as being sort of dopey, sort of like not fully experienced with the world angel who, is like amazed by something as simple as like a chocolate milkshake. And especially considering that he normally plays roles that are like tough badasses, it was all the more entertaining. But beyond that, I didn't really laugh at any jokes. Honestly, I thought the plot was kind of funky, where it just kept going back to the same venues over and over again. And also, I felt like Seth Rogen's character wasn't rich enough for the themes. Like, he just drives like a Tesla, and I feel like he should have had 6 cars in his garage and a much bigger mansion and stuff, because that's the real wealth and the real inequality. That's sort of like 1%. Those are the people we, gotta really be worried about, because those are the people who have such a level of wealth and advantage that it's sort of impossible to ever even imagine getting to that sort of level, etc. But yeah, I didn't find it very funny. I found the acting to be really stiff. I found the plot to be sort of nonsensical regarding its themes. I also just thought it was kind of funky how the plot just kind of kept going back to the same sets and locations. And I felt like the ending just was sort of like a nothing flop. And it also sort of just ended out of nowhere, in my opinion. So again, I had to keep this one kind of short, but I just wanted to say something, because to me, this is literally one of the worst movies I think I've ever seen. And it has such a high score in both categories that's kind of blowing my mind. So if you disagree with me and you agree with this whole Rotten Tomatoes score, etc., please let me know in the comments why you like it, because genuinely I'd like to hear another perspective, and maybe you'd actually be able to convince me of why, because as of right now, I feel genuinely baffled, where it almost feels like a Mandela effect thing, where it's like, did I watch a different movie from everyone else? So yeah, with that, I think I'm going to just wrap this one up. I hope you guys enjoyed this. Let me know if you'd like to see more of these little movie reviews. But beyond that, I'll see you in the next one. So, bye.